The supplies won't last the winter if we carry dead weight.
I can earn my keep.
You haven't proven that yet, woman.
The sun hung low over the rolling plains, painting the sky in streaks of gold and crimson. Dust swirled across the dirt road leading to the ramshackle town of Brackenidge, a place where secrets lingered like the scent of old wood and leather. At the edge of town, a young girl sat on the creaking porch of a weathered cabin, her eyes tracing the horizon with a mix of fear and longing. She was 16, round and heavy for her age, her body drawing whispers wherever she went, and her heart burdened with a weight far heavier than her frame. Her father, a stern and bitter man, had never hidden his disdain for her. In his eyes, she was nothing but a liability, a reminder of what he could not control. Her name was Leora, and in a town like Brackenidge, appearances were everything. Folks talked in low tones about her unusual size, the way her skirts stretched over her hips and her sleeves tightened over her arms. Leora had learned early that kindness was rare and cruelty often came wrapped in smiles. But she had something the whispers didn't see, a quiet strength, a spark of intelligence and resilience that even her father could not crush, though he tried. That morning the air smelled of scorched grass and leather. The rattling of the windmill sounded like an old warning bell, one that only she seemed to hear. Her father appeared at the cabin's doorway, his tall frame casting a shadow over the worn floorboards. His face was weathered, with lines carved deep from years of hard living, but his eyes were sharp, cold, and calculating. Leora had long stopped hoping for warmth from him, though a small part of her still remembered a time when she had begged for approval that never came. "Pack your things," he said, his voice firm as a whip. "You're leaving today." Leora's stomach sank. She had heard rumors about men who bought children from desperate families. Men who lived alone on the outskirts of town, men whose intentions were questionable. Her father never bothered with explanations. To him, she was an object to be sold, a means to settle debts he had accumulated over years of reckless gambling and harsh choices. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Why me?" He didn't answer with words. Instead, he gestured toward the barn where a horse hitched to a wagon waited, its flanks glistening in the morning sun. Leora's heart raced as the full meaning hit her. She was to leave Brackenidge, to be handed over to a man she had never met. The thought of the unknown filled her with both terror and a strange, unformed curiosity. Her father's gaze hardened. "No more questions. You go willingly, or I'll make sure the sheriff has a reason to lock you up for running away. Either way, you leave." She had no choice. Every step toward the wagon felt like walking into the jaws of an unknown beast. Her belongings were few clothes that hung loosely on her frame, a small leather satchel with a few books she treasured, and a locket with a faded photograph of her mother, a woman who had died when Leora was just a child. She clutched it tightly, as if holding on to the last fragment of love she had ever known. The journey to the ranch was long, the landscape stretching endlessly, painted with golden fields and distant mountains. Leora's mind raced with questions. Who was this man? Was he cruel like her father, or could he be different? Every shadow cast by the setting sun seemed to twist into something menacing, yet there was a quiet beauty in the solitude that made her pulse, quickened with both fear and a strange hope. The ranch itself appeared suddenly, as if it had risen from the earth with a will of its own. A sprawling land of red soil, jagged rocks, and weathered fences, it carried the scent of wild freedom and hard work. Horses stamped their hooves in the paddock, and the distant clanging of tools hinted at labor that never ceased. Leora's hands shook as the wagon drew to a halt. A man stepped out from the shadows of the barn. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair streaked by silver and eyes that seemed to measure her not with judgment, but with quiet calculation. His presence was commanding, yet there was an odd calmness about him that made Leora pause. This was not a man of cruel words, yet something in his stance suggested he did not suffer fools lightly. "I am Roderick Hale," he said, his voice deep and steady. "I hear you've been sent my way." Leora swallowed, her throat tight. "Yes, sir," she managed. Though the words felt fragile in the open air, Roderick studied her for a long moment, his gaze sweeping over her frame with no hint of mockery, only curiosity. Then he nodded once. "You're heavier than I expected. That will make certain tasks harder, but perhaps not impossible." His words were blunt. But Leora detected no malice, only a strange interest. Like a puzzle he was willing to solve rather than dismiss. As she stepped down from the wagon, her father's voice rang out behind her, sharp and final. "Don't think for a second this means you're free. You're alone now, girl. Make sure you survive." Just like that, he was gone, swallowed by the dusty horizon, leaving her on the edge of an unknown life. Leora's heart pounded in her chest, a mixture of fear, anger, and a spark of something she could not name. The ranch, with its vast fields and the looming figure of Roderick Hale, stretched before her like a challenge she did not yet understand. Roderick led her inside the main house, a sturdy structure of timber and stone. The air smelled of wood polish and something richer, earthier, like leather and grain. He handed her a room key, a small gesture that hinted at rules, perhaps even respect, but nothing more. "You'll start tomorrow. Rest tonight. The work is hard, but it can be done if you're willing." Leora sank onto the narrow bed, staring at the wooden ceiling above. Her thoughts tumbled wildly. What did he mean by work? Was it chores, training, something more? And yet, even in the dark corners of doubt, a sliver of hope began to take root. Perhaps this man was different from her father. Perhaps she had a chance to prove herself in ways no one had ever allowed. But as sleep tugged at her eyes, she could not shake the feeling that Roderick Hale had plans that went beyond ordinary ranch life. Plans that were carefully hidden behind the calm surface of his piercing gaze. And deep down, she sensed that those plans would change her life forever, in ways she could not yet imagine. The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters, carrying with it the distant cry of a coyote. Leora's pulse quickened. She clutched her locket and whispered a silent promise to herself. She would survive this, no matter the cost. And perhaps, just perhaps, she would find a power within herself that no one, least of all her cruel father, could ever take away. Outside, Roderick Hale watched from the porch, his silhouette dark against the last light of day. The ranch stretched endlessly around him, quiet except for the distant animals and the whisper of the wind through the fields. A faint smile touched his lips, almost imperceptible as he turned back inside. He knew the girl would test him as he would test her, and the results were bound to defy everyone's expectations. And somewhere deep in the shadows of that vast land, a secret waited, one that would shake the very foundations of what Leora had been told about strength, trust, and the people who held the power to shape her destiny. The morning came with a chill that cut through the thin walls of her small room. Leora woke to the distant crow of a rooster and the faint smell of hay mixed with earth. She rose slowly, her limbs stiff from sleeping on a mattress that had seen too many seasons. The day outside was already alive with motion. The ranch had its own rhythm, a constant pulse of labor and life that seemed both overwhelming and hypnotic. Horses neighed from the paddocks, a dog barked in the distance, and the wind carried the scent of cattle and fresh soil. Leora dressed quietly, tugging at clothes that felt too tight in some places and loose in others. She didn't know how to act, what to expect. The rancher had given her little direction beyond a curt warning: start tomorrow. That left today unclaimed, a blank space filled with possibility and fear. She stepped outside, feeling the coarse wood of the porch under her bare feet, and paused. The sun had risen fully now, casting long shadows that stretched across the open land. It was beautiful in a way that made her chest tighten, a wildness untouched by the small town she had left behind. As she walked along the edge of the fields, she noticed signs of life she had never considered before. The horses had marks where they had rubbed against the fence posts. Soil was churned where the cattle had moved, and small tracks from foxes and rabbits threaded through the grass. She realized that the ranch was alive in ways she hadn't understood from a distance, and it seemed as though the land itself had secrets. Roderick Hale appeared suddenly, his boots crunching against the dirt path. He was even taller up close, his shoulders broad and unyielding. His eyes, dark and calculating, seemed to measure everything. From the way she held herself to the way the wind lifted her hair. "You've had time to look around," he said, his voice low but firm. "Good. You'll need to learn quickly here. The land doesn't wait for anyone." I don't know where to start," Leora admitted. Her voice sounded small to her own ears, and she hated it. "That's natural," Roderick said, his tone softening slightly. "Everyone feels lost at first. But the work doesn't forgive hesitation. Watch, learn, and then act." He gestured toward a series of wooden fences and a small barn in the distance. "The cattle must be checked daily. The fences must be secure. The barns must be clean. Every detail matters." Laura nodded, swallowing her fear. She had always been observant, a quiet watcher in a world that often judged her too harshly for her size. Perhaps that would serve her here. Perhaps not. The day stretched on with the relentless pace of ranch life. Roderick moved with a precision that bordered on ritualistic, performing each task with a focus that seemed almost impossible. Leora followed, trying to keep up, fumbling with gates and tools, her muscles aching in ways she had never known. The ranch demanded strength, yes, but also patience and intelligence. And she realized quickly that Roderick was not just testing her body, he was testing her mind. Between tasks, he watched her silently, his gaze unreadable. Leora caught herself wondering what he saw in her. Was it only the work, the immediate utility of her labor? Or was there something deeper, some plan she could not yet see? She did not dare ask. There was a quiet danger in questions here, and Roderick's silence often felt heavier than his words. When the sun began to dip low in the sky, painting the ranch in amber and shadow, Leora found herself near the edge of a small pond. She knelt by the water, cupping it in her hands, trying to wash the dirt and sweat from her skin. Her reflection looked strange to her round cheeks, wide eyes, and hair matted from the day's labor. For the first time, she felt a flicker of pride. She had survived the day. She had learned more than she thought possible. And yet a strange unease settled over her. That evening, Roderick called her to the main house. He handed her a notebook, its leather cover worn, but solid, and a pencil. "You'll keep records," he said simply. "Everything you notice. Every animal, every problem, every change in the weather. This ranch will teach you things no one else could, if you pay attention." Leora felt the weight of the notebook in her hands. It was not just a book, it was a responsibility, a contract of trust. And she knew instinctively that Roderick's expectations were not ordinary. Over the next few days, she began to see the rhythm of life on the ranch more clearly. The mornings started before sunrise, and the work did not stop until the last light faded. Cattle needed feeding, horses needed grooming, fences needed repairing, and barns needed tending. She learned to move with purpose, to anticipate Roderick's instructions, to observe the land as though it had a mind of its own. And all the while, she felt the quiet pressure of his gaze. Roderick was never cruel, but he was exacting. He corrected her when she was careless, guided her when she was uncertain, and tested her in ways that were subtle but relentless. Leora began to understand that this man had a vision, one that did not involve cruelty but demanded perseverance. One evening, as the sun sank behind the distant hills, Leora noticed a structure she had not seen before. A small shed tucked behind the barn, its door slightly ajar, revealing shelves lined with jars and tools she could not identify. Roderick noticed her curiosity and did not immediately speak. Instead, he waited until she turned back toward him. "You've noticed the shed," he said quietly. "Good. There are things on this ranch that cannot be seen all at once. Knowledge comes gradually, like the growth of the land itself." Leora nodded, intrigued. She sensed there were mysteries here, pieces of the ranch and of Roderick himself that were carefully hidden. The thought made her pulse quicken. She had left a cruel father behind, a man who saw her only as property. But here was a man whose intentions were unclear, whose plans were wrapped in silence and careful observation. That night, she lay in bed, her mind spinning with questions. Who was Roderick Hale, truly? Why had her father sold her to him? And why did it feel as if this ranch were more than just a place of work? The wind whispered through the trees outside, carrying with it the distant sound of hooves and the faint rustle of animals moving in the dark. Leora felt the weight of the ranch pressing in. It's both challenging and inviting her. In the following days, she discovered small secrets. A hidden trail that led to a grove of ancient oak trees, a hollow in the ground where water collected in unexpected ways, and patterns in the animals' behavior that spoke of rhythms she had never noticed before. Each discovery felt like a puzzle piece, and she realized that Roderick's tests were not just about labor, they were about perception, awareness, and resilience. One afternoon, Roderick led her to a fenced pasture at the far edge of the property. The land here was rougher, less tended, with patches of wild grass and rocky soil. He handed her a heavy rope and gestured toward a stubborn horse that had resisted his efforts. "You'll try," he said simply. "It will not be easy, but nothing worth doing ever is." Leora approached the horse cautiously, her hands trembling slightly. The animal eyed her warily, muscles tensed, nostrils flaring. She felt a surge of fear, but also a strange thrill. This was more than work. It was a test of courage, patience, and understanding. Roderick stepped back, silent, letting her take the first steps. She murmured to the horse, gentle and calm, remembering lessons she had learned from watching him. Slowly, the animal relaxed, and she began to guide it with a combination of firmness and care. Roderick watched without interference, his dark eyes observing every movement. By the time she returned the horse to its stall, exhausted and triumphant, Roderick nodded once. "Good," he said. "You're learning faster than I expected. But the hardest lessons are yet to come." Leora felt both dread and anticipation at his words. The ranch held challenges she had never imagined. Roderick Hale's plans, whatever they were, loomed over her like a shadow she could not yet name. She realized that survival here would require more than physical strength. She would need insight, courage, and perhaps a courage she did not yet know she possessed. As night fell, the wind carried the scent of grass and earth, and somewhere in the darkness, the coyote cried. Leora stared out her window at the vast expanse of land, wondering what secrets awaited her. She had left behind a cruel father, but the world she had stepped into was no less formidable. Only here the stakes were different, and the possibilities far stranger than she could yet imagine, and somewhere deep in the heart of the ranch. Roderick Hale sat by the fire, a map spread before him, plans quietly forming. The girl he had taken in was strong in ways most would not see, and he knew that in time she would reveal talents and resilience that would astonish even him. But for now, the story was just beginning, and the ranch's quiet mysteries waited patiently, ready to challenge, test, and transform them both. The days on the ranch grew longer, the sun climbing high and burning down mercilessly over the fields. Leora moved through her chores with a rhythm that was slowly becoming second nature. She could feel her muscles growing stronger, her hands tougher from gripping ropes and feeding the cattle. Still, there were moments when exhaustion took her by surprise. When she found herself leaning against a fence post, listening to the wind as if it might offer some secret advice, Roderick Hale observed her quietly during those moments. He never offered unnecessary praise, but he never punished her either. He was patient in a way that seemed almost tactical, as though he were shaping her, molding her into something far greater than a simple ranch hand. Leora could not help but wonder what he had planned for her, what his intentions truly were. Every glance from him seemed layered with meaning she could not yet decipher, a puzzle she felt compelled to solve. It was during one of these quiet moments that she first noticed another presence on the ranch. A man named Silas, smaller in stature, but wiry and quick, arrived unexpectedly with supplies. He had a sharp eye and a quick tongue, and he spoke to Roderick with a familiarity that suggested he had been there before. For Leora, Silas was a new variable in an already complex life. He watched her with a mixture of curiosity and amusement, occasionally offering hints about the ranch's history, though never fully explaining. "The place has its own ways," Silas said one evening, tossing a bag of grain onto the barn floor. "Don't let the work fool you. There's more to this land than fences and cattle." Leora nodded, sensing there was truth in his words. though she could not yet grasp the full meaning. Roderick had told her she needed to observe everything, and now it became clear that observation alone was not enough. Understanding required questioning. Questions were dangerous. Here missteps could cost more than just pride. Meanwhile, Leora's thoughts often drifted back to her father. Even from miles away, his shadow lingered over her life, a reminder of the cruelty that had driven her into this unknown world. She tried not to dwell on it, but at night, when the wind rattled the shutters and the ranch was silent, except for the occasional animal sound, memories of his harsh words haunted her. He had treated her as property, sold her without a second thought, and yet she had survived. Somehow, that survival had become a point of defiance. She would not be broken, not here, not anywhere. Directed her toward hidden groves and secret paths that twisted through dense woods and fields. In those spaces, she felt a rare sense of freedom, space where she could breathe without the weight of expectation pressing down. Yet even there, Teetha Ranch itself seemed to take notice of her resolve. She began discovering corners of the land that Roderick Neverhe Ranch whispered hints of its challenges. A stream that seemed shallow suddenly deepened. A path that looked safe revealed hidden rocks, and animals behaved unpredictably. Leora learned quickly that nothing on this land was ordinary. Every day demanded attention, intelligence, and care. One evening, as the sun dipped behind jagged hills, Leora followed a fox along a narrow path near the northern edge of the ranch. She crouched behind a bush, fascinated by the creature's agility and focus. It struck her how much the animals mirrored life. Here they were cautious, calculating, and aware of dangers that humans often overlooked. Her mind raced. Perhaps survival here was less about brute strength and more about perception, about noticing what others missed. Roderick approached silently from behind, his shadow long against the golden light. "You've been studying the animals," he said, his tone calm but deliberate. "Good. They teach more than you realize, if you're willing to learn." I think I'm starting to understand," Leora said, though she didn't know if she truly was. "There's more to this place than work, isn't there?" Roderick's eyes glimmered faintly. "Yes, but understanding comes in time. And sometimes, lessons are painful." The following days brought new challenges. Roderick had her repairing fences in areas where the earth was uneven and rocks hid beneath the soil. She wrestled with heavy gates and tangled ropes, learning to push beyond fatigue. Silas offered guidance, but always with a sly smirk, as if enjoying the struggle. "You've got spirit, girl," he said one afternoon. "But the ranch will teach you humility, too." It was during these moments that Leora began noticing tensions beyond the physical labor. Roderick and Silas exchanged quiet words that she could only half hear, their conversations full of coded language and long pauses. Leora's curiosity burned. She wanted to know what plans Roderick had, why he had taken her in, and what the future held. She suspected she was not merely a worker here, but part of something larger, something that would test her in ways she had not yet imagined. At night, she would lie awake, listening to the ranch settle into silence. Every creak of the barn, every distant animal call, seemed to carry hidden meaning. She began keeping careful notes in her leather notebook, sketching maps of the ranch, recording observations of the animals, and noting patterns she saw in Roderick's behavior. Slowly, a picture began to form, not complete, but enough to make her realize that her survival depended on understanding. More than just the tasks she was assigned, then came the first real challenge. A sudden storm swept across the plains, bringing with it fierce wind, thunder, and heavy rain. Cattle broke free from their pens, horses panicked, and the land itself seemed to resist. Roderick barked orders, moving with precision and authority, while Leora scrambled to secure gates, herd animals, and prevent disaster. Her muscles burned, her hands cut and bruised. But she pressed on, guided by instinct, observation, and the lessons she had been taught. Silas worked beside her, his quick movements complementing her efforts. "Keep your focus," he shouted over the storm. "Don't let fear take hold." By the time the storm passed, exhaustion weighed heavily on everyone. The animals were accounted for, the fences secured, and the barns intact, but Leora felt a mixture of triumph and unease. The storm had been a test, a reminder that the ranch was unpredictable and relentless. And it also made clear that Roderick's plans for her were far from ordinary. He was shaping her into someone capable of handling challenges that no ordinary 16-year-old could survive. After the storm, Roderick led her to the edge of a cliff overlooking the ranch. The land stretched endlessly, a tapestry of gold and green under the fading sunlight. "You see this?" he asked, his voice low. "Every inch of it must be understood. Every detail matters. The world is unforgiving to those who do not pay attention." Leora nodded, her chest still heaving. "I understand, sir," she said, though she did not fully comprehend the depth of what he meant. "You are learning," he said quietly. "But learning is not enough. You must anticipate. You must think ahead, act before the danger even appears. That is what will keep you alive here." As they returned to the house, Leora's mind raced. She had survived her father's cruelty, the unknown journey, and the storm. But Roderick's lessons suggested that the true challenges were yet to come. And somewhere deep in her heart, she knew that survival here would demand more than strength, and courage. It would demand a new understanding of herself, and perhaps a confrontation with her past that she could not yet imagine. Over the following weeks, subtle tensions began to surface. Silas occasionally muttered about neighboring ranchers, about disputes over land and livestock. Roderick remained calm, but Leora sensed a careful calculation in every move he made. The ranch was not isolated by accident. It was a fortress of sorts, prepared for threats she could not yet name. She began to see that her training was not only about work and survival, but also about preparation for challenges beyond the immediate. One evening, she overheard Roderick speaking to Silas in low tones about a mysterious shipment due to arrive at the ranch. They spoke in cryptic terms, mentioning timing and security and something called the plan. Leora's pulse quickened. She did not know what the plan involved, but the careful attention and secrecy suggested that she was part of something far greater than she had realized. As night fell, she lay in bed, staring at the wooden ceiling, feeling the weight of the ranch pressing in on her. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying distant animal sounds and a faint sense of anticipation. She realized that every day brought new challenges, new lessons, and new mysteries. The ranch was alive, and she was a part of it now. Whether she liked it or not, Roderick Hale's plans remained shrouded in secrecy. Silas's intentions were unclear, and Leora's own potential was only beginning to emerge. She had been sold by her cruel father, yes, but the life she now led was nothing like the one she had imagined. She was learning, surviving, and growing, but the true test was still ahead, waiting to reveal itself in ways she could not yet predict. And somewhere in the shadows of the ranch, the wind carried a promise of challenges, revelations, and a future that would test every ounce of strength. Intelligence and courage Leora possessed. The story was far from over, and the mysteries of the ranch of Roderick Hale and of her own destiny remained, locked in a delicate tension that neither time nor the storm had yet unraveled. The air on the ranch felt charged, as though the land itself was holding its breath. Leora moved through the fields with a purpose sharper than ever, her hands calloused, her mind alert to every sound, every movement. The wind had changed, carrying an unfamiliar scent of iron and distant smoke. Even the animals seemed restless, their unease radiating in low, anxious murmurs. Leora's pulse quickened. Something was coming, though she did not know what. Roderick Hale appeared from the barn, his expression unreadable. He walked toward her, boots crunching on the dry earth, eyes dark and assessing. "There's a storm coming," he said, his voice calm but edged with urgency. "Not the kind the weather brings. Prepare yourself." Leora nodded, heart pounding. She had learned to trust his words even when they were cryptic. There was a rhythm to his warnings, a code she was beginning to understand. It was not just survival of the body he demanded. It was survival of thought, intuition, and nerve. Silas arrived moments later, carrying bundles of rope and tools. "We've got work," he said, his tone unusually serious. "The north pastures need securing, and the animals are on edge. If you hesitate, it could get ugly." Leora's stomach twisted. The ranch had always been challenging, but the tension in Silas's voice hinted at something beyond the ordinary. She followed him and Roderick, moving quickly through the uneven terrain, scanning every fence line, every gate. The distant hills that had seemed so peaceful before now looked like looming threats, shadows concealing dangers she could not yet see. Hours passed in a blur of motion. Leora climbed over fences, tied down restless horses, and checked every pen for signs of weakness. Sweat streamed down her face, dirt smeared her arms, and every muscle ached, but she felt a strange exhilaration. For the first time she realized that she was not just surviving, she was rising to meet the challenges of this land. Roderick moved beside her silently, occasionally pointing out a weak post or a frayed rope. His presence was commanding yet restrained, like a predator observing its prey without striking. Leora felt both comforted and unnerved by him. She had long ago left her father's cruelty behind, but this man's intentions remained a puzzle. And the sense of anticipation weighed heavily on her. As the sun began to set, shadows stretched across the fields, painting everything in gold and blood red. The wind whispered warnings, carrying the scent of something unfamiliar. A mix of smoke, dust, and iron. Leora froze at the edge of a small ravine, noticing a movement she could not identify. "Stay alert," Roderick's voice broke the tension, low and commanding. "They're coming." Leora's heart thudded. She did not know who they were, but instinct told her danger had arrived. Silas glanced toward the distant tree line, eyes sharp. "Reinforcements may be needed," he said, voice tense. "The north gates won't hold long if they push too hard." Every sound seemed magnified, the rustle of leaves, the clatter of hooves, the snapping of dry branches. Leora's mind raced as she considered every possibility. Her training, the lessons of the last weeks, the careful observations of Roderick, they all converged now, demanding quick decisions. Suddenly, a shout rang out from the far field. A rider appeared, galloping fast, dust trailing behind. Leora recognized the figure immediately, someone from the neighboring land, someone who had been rumored to covet Roderick's property and cattle. Her stomach clenched. The tensions Roderick had spoken of were not just theory, they were real. The moment of confrontation had arrived. Roderick moved swiftly, issuing orders with precision. "North gates first." Leora helped secure the horses. "Silas, with me. Move." The next hour was chaos. Horses bolted, cattle panicked, and the wind tore across the fields, carrying cries and shouts. Leora worked with a focus she had never known, tying animals to sturdy posts, calming those she could, and moving with agility despite the weight she carried. Every action counted. Every mistake could cost them dearly. Roderick and Silas intercepted the first group of intruders at the north gate. Leora watched from a distance, heart racing, her hands gripping the rope she had used to secure a frightened mare. The intruders were skilled, but Roderick's precision and strategy began to turn the tide. Leora felt a thrill of fear and awe, realizing that the ranch was a fortress in every sense, and its master, a strategist beyond her understanding. Amid the chaos, Leora noticed something remarkable. The animals, restless and panicked moments before, were responding to her commands, her voice calm but firm. She felt a surge of confidence. Perhaps this land, harsh and unforgiving, had chosen her as much as she had chosen to survive it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deep purples and fiery reds, the battle for the ranch's safety reached a tense standstill. The intruders were regrouping, retreating just enough to gather strength for another push. Leora, Roderick, and Silas stood together, their breaths heavy, the ranch around them tense and alive, every inch of it poised for the next challenge. Roderick turned to Leora, his eyes dark and assessing. "You've done well," he said quietly. "But the hardest part is coming. Pay attention, observe, anticipate. This land will test you, but you must not falter." Leora nodded, heart pounding, knowing that the storm, both literal and metaphorical, was far from over. She had survived the first wave, but the real trial was yet to come. Every step, every decision, every ounce of courage would be demanded from her in the hours ahead. Silas approached, wiping sweat and grime from his brow. They'll try again, he said grimly. Roderick's planning something bigger, and will need every hand ready. Leora's pulse quickened. She could feel the weight of responsibility, the intensity of the moment pressing down like the summer sun. Yet beneath the fear, a spark of determination burned brighter than ever. She had come so far from a cruel father who saw her as nothing, to a ranch that demanded everything, to a team that now relied on her. She would not fail. Not now, not ever. As darkness fell fully over the ranch, distant hills were black against the night sky, the wind whispering warnings through the trees. Leora stood at the edge of the main yard, rope in hand, heart pounding, mind sharp. The land was alive with tension, every shadow a potential threat, every sound a signal. She sensed the climax approaching, the moment where everything would be tested: her courage, her strength, her intelligence, and her trust in Roderick's guidance. Roderick's silhouette appeared against the moonlight, calm yet commanding. "Prepare yourself," he said. "The next move will define us." There is no room for error. Leora's fingers tightened on the rope, eyes scanning the horizon. She had faced fear before, but never like this. The ranch, once a place of learning, was now a battlefield of strategy and survival. And in the depths of her being, she knew that the coming hours would decide not just the fate of the ranch, but the future of her own life. The night was alive with anticipation. Every creature held its breath, every shadow seemed to shift with hidden intent. Leora's heart raced, mind alert, senses sharpened. The conflicts that had begun with her cruel father, her journey to this remote ranch, and the secretive plans of Roderick Hale were converging now. Threading together into a moment of reckoning she could neither avoid nor fully understand. And somewhere in the darkness, beyond the fences and fields, the first signs of the final test began to stir, carrying with them the promise of danger, revelation, and the chance for something greater than Fyra, chance for courage, resilience, and a new beginning. The night was still, almost unnaturally so, as if the land itself were holding its breath. Leora crouched behind the hay bales, eyes scanning the shadows, every muscle tense. The intruders had regrouped, their whispers carried faintly on the wind, and the distant sound of hooves indicated they were ready for another push. But this time, Leora felt different. She had survived storms, mastered the unpredictable animals, and learned the land's hidden ways. She had grown stronger, faster, and sharper. And she trusted Roderick's guidance implicitly. Roderick appeared beside her, calm as always, yet with an intensity in his eyes that reminded her of the stakes. "Stay close," he said softly. "Observe." We moved together. Silas came up from the opposite side, gripping a rope and muttering under his breath about the timing. "They won't expect her," he said, nodding toward Leora. "Not yet." Leora felt a thrill surge through her, a mix of fear and determination. She had never imagined herself in this position, facing danger directly, but she realized now that she was ready. The cruel father who had sold her seemed like a distant memory, a shadow that could no longer touch her. Here in the open fields, among the animals and the hard-earned wisdom of Roderick Hale, she had found her strength. The intruders made their move, and chaos erupted across the ranch. Horses bolted, cattle scattered, and the first shouts rang out. Leora moved with a precision born of weeks of preparation. She guided the frightened animals toward safety, tying ropes and closing gates with steady hands. Every motion counted, every decision mattered, and for the first time, she felt the power of her own abilities. Roderick and Silas intercepted the intruders, their coordinated strategy turning the tide. Leora watched from her position, heart pounding. As the attackers stumbled against well-placed obstacles, the ranch's hidden strengths revealed in full. She realized then that this land, harsh and unforgiving, had chosen her as much as she had chosen to endure it. Hours passed in a blur of motion and tension. The intruders were clever and determined, but the teamwork between Roderick, Silas, and Leora proved unstoppable. Leora moved with a grace and confidence that surprised even herself, commanding the animals, predicting the intruders' movements, and acting before danger could fully form. By the time the moon rose high in the sky, the attackers had retreated, leaving the ranch intact and the night once again calm. Roderick approached Leora, his expression unreadable at first, then softening into a rare smile. "You've done well," he said. "Better than I could have expected. You've earned more than survival tonight. You've earned respect." Leora felt a surge of relief and pride. She had faced fear, chaos, and uncertainty, and she had not only survived, she had thrived. She looked around at the ranch, at the animals now calm, fences secure, the barns untouched, and felt a deep connection to the land and its keeper. Silas clapped her on the shoulder, grinning. "You've got spirit," he said. "The ranch hasn't seen this kind of courage in a long time." The following morning brought a sense of quiet triumph. Leora walked through the fields with a lighter step, her body still tired, but her mind sharper than ever. She noticed details she had missed before, the way the sun lit the dust on the far pasture, the subtle signs of the animals' habits, the hidden paths through the trees. Each observation felt like a reward for the hard work and struggle of the past weeks. Roderick watched her from the porch. Arms crossed, the usual calm intensity in his gaze. "You've grown," he said simply. "Not just in skill, but in understanding. This land requires more than hands it, requires eyes, mind, and heart. You've shown all three." Leora felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of belonging she had never known. The cruel father who had sold her seemed a distant memory, a chapter of her life that had forged her strength rather than broken her. Here she was valued, capable, and part of something greater. In the days that followed, life returned to a steady rhythm. The ranch demanded hard work, but it also offered rewards, quiet moments by the pond. Evenings watching the sun set over the hills, and nights when the stars stretched across the sky, vast and unbroken. Leora discovered joy in small victories, in understanding the land, in learning the secrets of animals and nature. She and Silas shared quiet moments of laughter, exchanging stories of past mistakes and clever solutions. And Roderick, ever the watchful mentor, allowed her more freedom, more trust. As he saw her confidence and skill grow, one afternoon while checking the northern fence line, Leora stumbled upon the hidden shed she had noticed weeks before. Inside she found not just tools and supplies, but maps of the ranch, plans for improvements, and notes detailing Roderick's vision for the property. It became clear that the ranch was more than a home or a workplace. It was a legacy, a careful orchestration of land, animals, and people working in harmony. Leora realized then that she was part of this vision, not by accident, but because Roderick had recognized potential in her that even she had doubted. As the sun set that evening, painting the sky in gold and amber, Leora stood beside Roderick on the porch. The ranch stretched endlessly before them, calm and alive, each detail familiar and yet full of potential. "You've come far," Roderick said quietly, voice steady but filled with a rare warmth. "More than anyone could have expected. The ranch is stronger because of you." Leora looked at him, a smile breaking across her face for the first time without hesitation. "I didn't just survive," she said. "I've learned, and I've grown. Thanks to you." Roderick's gaze softened. "You've earned it, Leora. Remember, strength isn't just about power. It's about resilience, courage, and the choices you make in the face of fear. You've proven all of these." The next weeks were filled with rebuilding, learning, and quiet triumphs. The ranch flourished under their combined efforts, and the bonds between Leora, Roderick, and Silas deepened into something more than necessity. They became trust, loyalty, and friendship forged in the fires of challenge. Leora began to see herself not as the girl her father had deemed worthless, but as a capable, resilient young woman with a future she could shape with her own hands. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills and the sky turned soft shades of pink and violet, Leora walked through the fields alone. She paused by the pond, watching her reflection ripple in the water. For the first time she saw strength, confidence, and a quiet determination staring back at her. The cruel father who had sold her no longer held power over her. His shadow had been replaced by her own light, steady and unwavering, Roderick joined her quietly, standing beside her as the wind stirred the grass. "You've done more than survive, Leora," he said. "You've transformed, and in doing so, you've transformed this place as well." Silas appeared from the tree line, carrying a small bundle of supplies, smiling broadly. "We make a good team," he said. "The ranch has never been better thanks to both of you." Leora smiled, feeling a sense of belonging she had never imagined. The land, the animals, Roderick, Silas, all of it, was now part of her world, a world she had fought to understand and earn. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and cruelty, and emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace whatever the future held. As night fell over the ranch, stars glittering in the vast sky, Leora felt a deep peace. The conflicts of her past, the fears of the present, and the mysteries of the ranch had all led her to this moment. She knew there would be challenges ahead, but she also knew she was ready. The girl who had been sold to a lone rancher had become a young woman who could face the world with courage and wisdom. And as the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of earth and wild grass, Leora understood the truth that had been forming within her all along. Strength was not just about surviving the cruelty of others, but about finding power within, embracing challenges, and shaping one's destiny with resilience, courage, and hope. The ranch lay quiet and strong around her, a living testament to the trials and triumphs that had brought them here. The intruders were gone, the storms weathered, and the land and its people flourished together. Leora, Roderick, and Silas stood united, a bond forged in hardship and strengthened by trust. And as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, it promised new beginnings, unshakable hope, and the knowledge that they could face anything together. Leora smiled, heart light. Feeling the warmth of belonging for the first time in her life, the cruel past had been left behind, replaced by the strength she had discovered, the lessons she had learned, and the life she had earned. The ranch was no longer just a place, it was home, and she knew, deep in her heart, that this was only the beginning of the story she would write for herself. Full of courage, resilience, and hope that no darkness could ever erase.